like living at your house. It's you're living completely independently, but you're in a community setting. And then there's other levels of living, like assisted living or memory care or rehab, or if you need long-term skilled nursing care, or if you're needing rehab because you just came out of a surgery, or you're needing physical therapy. So on this entire campus here, you can live here and kind of move through the different levels as your needs adjust or as your needs maybe increase. And so one of the benefits of that is that you can live here and you never have to move anywhere else. In some other communities across the Bay Area, there's what's called, oops. I thought it was my battery. But what that means is you can live on this campus and you never have to move elsewhere. So for example, there's other communities that are assisted living or independent living, but they don't necessarily have rehab or memory care or skilled nursing on their campus. So then you would have to go and move somewhere else. And so if you move to a CCRC environment, you don't really ever have to worry about doing that. We can make the adjustments and accommodate you here. It's also great for couples that maybe somebody else may need some different care needs, but then the other may not need those care needs. And so what that allows you to be able to do is you can still stay in your apartment, and then that other person may be able to need some assistance with memory care. Or let's say you need a short-term skilled stay. You're not having that person across town, they're just a short walk across the campus. And so that's an overall benefit. So I did want to just kind of let you know about what CCRCs are. Here in the Bay Area, we actually don't have a lot of them. There's only a few, and they're kind of scattered across the Bay Area. There's a couple on the peninsula. There's one out in the Tri-Valley. But there are about 1,800 CCRCs all across the nation. And some states, Pennsylvania has quite a few. And most of them have what is called a nonprofit status. So a nonprofit status, so there's for-profit, and then there's nonprofit. Masonic Homes and Acacia Creek are a nonprofit. 82% of CCRCs are not-for-profit organizations. And so what that means is that they are really more supporting benevolence or based on a foundation versus being a for-profit entity that is really looking more closely at the bottom line. They also have a high percentage of faith-based affiliations or some level of affiliation. I don't know if you guys know this, but Acacia Creek and Masonic Homes has a Mason affiliation. And if you know anything about the Masons, they are very much about serving their community, serving Masons, and serving the greater community. And so some communities have like a Mason affiliation, or they have a faith-based affiliation. You've probably heard of the Methodist homes, or the Lutheran homes, or the Baptist homes. All of those have a faith-based affiliation. And most CCRCs are actually not very big. They're not huge campuses. They usually have about 300 units, very similar to a size of what Acacia Creek is. So that's just a little CCRC history. There won't be any pop quiz later. But one other thing that I also want to let you guys know is in a CCRC is there's a lot of accreditations and the things that we have to hold ourselves to in standards in order to keep everyone who lives here safe. So one of them is our CARF accreditation, which is pretty much showing what our fiscal responsibility is. So we have to be certain level of CARF affiliated and accredited in order to remain in good standings. There is state oversight, so we do have the state that comes in, makes sure everything's running smoothly, making sure that, food safety, all of those different areas are being covered. We also have bond financing, so we have a tax-exempt bond financing that is supporting this building and allowing us to invest in it to keep it up. And then also CCRCs have a very low bankruptcy rate. You've probably heard post-COVID or even during COVID, there was a lot of senior living communities that were either filing for bankruptcy or were dealing with financial issues. In the CCRC environment, because the way they're structured, they're very financially stable. And so if you're working with a CCRC community, you can have a good, sound mind of the financial stability that exists with that community. So only 2% of CCRCs have actually ever filed for bankruptcy, and the CCRC model was developed back in the late 70s. So that shows you the stability of those organizations. The other piece of it is also CCRCs and having either a faith-based or a not-for-profit standing have a huge amount of social accountability. Most organizations, very similar to Masonic Homes and Acacia Creek, have some level of charitable fund. So they're supported by a charitable fund. And what that does is that allows us to be able to serve people who may or may not be able to afford to live in a place like Acacia Creek. And so being able to have that fund in order to take care of the seniors in the Bay Area is very important to them. Also, there's a huge amount of give back. If you talk to any of the residents that exist at Acacia Creek, they will talk about how they're giving back in the community service they're doing. We also are a very mission-driven organization, as I was talking about, being affiliated with the Masons. There's a very strong mission that we are trying to do by having a community like Acacia Creek and Masonic Homes. And we're also working on the ability to have some different options. So one of the things that we really have done very hard, and this is actually recent, is we've worked at adjusting some of the pricing that looks for Acacia Creek and our other ancillary services to be able to provide a really good affordable option here in the Bay Area. I know to use the word affordable in Bay Area is kind of an oxymoron, but we are trying to provide something that is very competitive in the marketplace. So I know that you guys are probably all wondering what's going on kind of as it relates to our economy, and everybody's trying to play the guessing game on what's going on with interest rates and whether it's a good time to sell my home or should I wait, and what is kind of happening, and if I make this large investment, how is that going to affect my overall portfolio, right? I'm assuming that. So we're going to talk a lot more about that in the next little session when we get into the contracts, but I did want to just talk briefly about the way to look at this investment in a CCRC as it relates to today's economy. So one of the things is that post-COVID and during COVID, I don't know if you guys know this, but a lot of communities were not allowed to allow people to move in. And so a lot of questions people had was, well, what is the financial stability of these communities? I will tell you, so I work with communities all over the nation, and I come to Acacia Creek and work with this community as well. And the occupancy rates across the nation for CCRCs has officially rebounded. Most communities are sitting in the high 80s and 90s% at this point, have pretty much seen almost full recovery from their COVID occupancy rates. The rate of new admissions are on the rise. And I'll share a little bit more about what's going on here at Acacia Creek for you guys to understand that too. And the amount of CCRCs in financial distress, as I mentioned, only 2% have filed bankruptcy. It's really non-existent. It's not something that we need to worry about. Are these communities financially stable? And the answer to that question is yes. So, and I say that remaining financially stable is up. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the financial model as it relates to a CCRC. And when we talk about a CCRC, I think there are kind of 4 things that we talk about. One is the lifestyle, living in a community environment. We have a group called our Successful Aging Group, and they go through and do studies and surveys and research and actually have shown that living in a CCRC actually is beneficial to your health. That there is also studies out there that have talked about community living can add upwards of 10 years to your life. And so that's really important. The other thing we talked at the beginning is about this continuum of care, but that's really an important element of being able to stay here and be able to ebb and flow through the community based on needs. We have residents that have gone to skilled nursing for a bit and then have come back home. And so in a CCRC, you have that flexibility. One thing I'm not going to go into deep here, but talking about how you can leverage your home equity in order to help fund your years in the community. And then stable costs. One of the things that we'll talk about in the deep dive about the contract is how the pricing adjusts and changes over time and how stable it is. And you guys will actually know that up front on how that'll adjust so you can manage accordingly. So before we talk about the financial models and the different entrance fee models, I just wanted to talk about a little bit of myths and realities of CCRCs, or when you're thinking about it, it's probably things that have come into your house and into your mind. So one of the things is that staying in my home is my best option. How many people have said that or think that that's the right thing? But she's admitting to it over here. So that's okay. One of the things that I will share with you, I'm a gerontologist by education, and I have worked in the senior space for a long time. And one of my first jobs that I had when I was in gerontology school is I worked for, in San Diego, I went to school down in San Diego, and I worked for the Meals on Wheels program. And I think everybody's familiar with Meals on Wheels are, right? So, and I was delivering, as a volunteer, Meals on Wheels. And one of the things that was sad to me was that there were people who lived in community, but a lot of people who were getting Meals on Wheels were not able to prepare their own meals, but then they were very isolated. And so I always looked back upon that moment of seeing people that were in their own homes, but almost felt like their home was becoming a burden to them or becoming something overwhelming to them, and almost feeling like they were kind of trapped in that environment. And one of the things that I think is great about a CCRC is that you still get your space, your home, you're not in a facility, but then you get the added benefits of being in community. And so it kind of has the best of both worlds from that perspective. So if you have the ability to stay in your community and stay in your home and be able to bring in everything that you have as an opportunity here, probably the best thing. But one of the things that the team here, Nancy actually over here who's doing our audio, she is in our lifestyles department. And her everyday life is to make sure that everybody is getting to do the things that they would love to do, and also helping fund a lot of those things that you probably wouldn't do if you were actually at home. And so that goes to that your current home will provide your best social life. So I know I can be a little bit of a hermit in my own home all the time. And so sometimes I think we don't necessarily push ourselves outside of that. And in a community environment, you have more of that opportunity. Your current home is the most cost effective. So I think that's another challenge. So we're going to talk a little bit about when we talk about the entrance fee. But one thing that I just want to have you guys think about is you've got your home, and probably many of you own your own home. And you also probably have a huge amount of home equity possibly in your homes as well. So if you stay in your current home, there's only really a couple ways that you can access that equity, right? You can sell it, right? Or you could do a reverse mortgage, or you could do a HELOC, right? And so when you take that money out of the home in some way, either through a reverse mortgage or a HELOC, but you still have all of the expenses related to the home. So let's say you take a HELOC out on your home, and
what's a HELOC?
A HELOC is a loan that you take out on your home equity. So it's like putting a second mortgage on your house, right? So if you already have a mortgage on your home and you take out that equity, you're putting it on that. So there's HELOCs, there's probably other names for it too. It's kind of like a second mortgage. So then you start paying a mortgage payment on that. And then you still have all the stuff you need to do to maintain your home. And then if you're using that to pay for care and all of that, you're then possibly even having to pay taxes on some of that money. So it may not be the most cost effective based on what your care needs are, if you have any. The other thing is it's easy to get care at home. I don't know if you guys have read any articles recently, but home care is a really big challenge, and a lot of people are struggling with getting any type of services in your home. So I have an 81-year-old mother, and she's very, very independent, but we have a hard time even getting her housekeeper and her gardener to show up on a regular time, let alone anybody that's actually giving services. So that is also a challenge. And then also, a CCRC is a nursing home. Have any of you guys actually been in a nursing home or a skilled nursing facility before? Does this feel like a skilled nursing facility here? Okay. So I think there's a lot of misconception that this place looks like somewhere where a hospital and really this place I think looks more like what would be like a large apartment community. We also have villa options, so there's many different options as well, but this is not a nursing home. If you need 24-hour nursing care, it's available to you, and you have that available to you. We have residents right now that are on a short-term stint over there, and then their plan is to come and move back into their independent living apartment once they've recovered from their surgery. So that is, we are not a nursing home. We have access to that, but that is not going to be here in this, this part of the community. So the advantages of living in a CCRC, I think I've talked a little bit about the lifestyle. I've talked about kind of this peace of mind, and I've also talked about finances. One other thing that I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about after I talk about the entrance fees is actually the tax benefits of a CCRC, which I don't know if you guys know much about. Okay. All right, so I'm going to get a little nitty-gritty into contracts, and if you're staying for the deep dive, we're going to get really in the nitty-gritty around these contracts. But I want to give you guys a little bit of an overview of CCRC contracts. Okay. So in the kind of world of a CCRC, there's a thing called an entrance fee. Have you guys all heard this term, entrance fee? Okay. The first thing that I want to just kind of break out is it's not a buy-in. So you may think that you are buying into a community. That's not it. There is a type of CCRC that's called the equity model. And most of them are active adult communities where you can buy in and you actually own property. And then it's your responsibility to sell that property just like you normally would in a normal house. And it would be in an age-restricted community that has certain tax benefits. Most of the CCRCs that you're going to see out there are going to kind of fit into three areas, okay? And it's called a type A, a type B, or a type C. I'll break those down for you. The first one is called a type A, and it's called a life care contract. And what that means is there's usually a larger entrance fee, and then there is a monthly fee that maintains its level. Cost of living adjustments may occur over time that remain the same across no matter what level of living you're in. So if you're in an independent living level, or you're moving into memory care or assisted living, or let's say you have a short-term stay over in skilled, your monthly fee will remain the same, okay? That's a life care contract. Usually the entrance fee is significantly higher in order to maintain those monthly fees across time, okay? So that's type A, okay? The next one, I'm gonna skip over B for a second, because we'll go back to that one, is what's called type C. And that's called a fee-for-service contract. Very simple to a rental. So you pay the rate of that service at the time that you need it, fee for service. So the life care, it remains the same. The fee-for-service has a very low fee that you pay into in the beginning, but mattering on the cost of that service at any given time, you would pay that rate as it is at that day. And you also really don't have any guarantees around that. So if you need assisted living and they're full, you're not really guaranteed any. It's very similar to a rental. The third one is called a modified or a type B. That's what Acacia Creek is. And what that means is that it's kind of a mixture of a life care and a fee-for-service contract. So we have different types, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But what the modified B is that it has certain benefits. The entrance fees are lower than a life care. And then they have some benefits. So for example, at Acacia Creek here, if you needed another level of care and you moved in under the entrance fee contract, the modified B, you get a discount for those services. You also get guaranteed. So if you're an entrance fee resident who's living in Acacia Creek at independent living and you needed assisted living, we would have to figure that out for you. So if we're full or we have to make accommodations for you, you're guaranteed that health care. And then rather than paying it the day rate, like you would on a fee for service, you actually get a discount. You get a 10% discount off on that. The other thing about entrance fees that are different from a fee for service contract is there are some kind of insurance related benefits to them. And we offer the ability for, if you have an entrance fee, if you're ever in a situation where you can no longer pay your monthly fee, your entrance fee starts to serve as an insurance policy for you, and you start to draw down on that entrance fee. So when you take that money out of your home and you put it into an entrance fee, you are literally securing yourself for the rest of your years, because you will never be in a situation where you're necessarily asked to leave based on financial needs. And that's a benefit of a not-for-profit, mission-based organization and an entrance fee. So as we're talking about these entrance fees, there's also some elements of the entrance fees you gotta understand. So there's one that's called a declining or a fixed. Here at Acacia Creek, we have both. So a fixed entrance fee means that you get a certain amount of it refunded back to you. So let's remember, go back to the modified B. I'm gonna try not to confuse you guys here. So you've got the modified B, you've got a certain entrance fee. At Acacia Creek, we have a 90% and a 50% fixed refundable. So let's take the 90% just to keep it simple. So you put in your entrance fee when you move in, and we'll talk about all the logistics of that in our next session. And then from day 91 till whenever you decide to end your contract, you get 90% of that money back. And that can go back to your legacy. It can go to a donation, or if you decided to just move out, you get that money back to continue to go on your merry way. So that is a fixed refundable, okay? Then there's another option. So when you're talking to people about these contracts, you want to ask, is it a fixed refundable or is it a declining? A lot of communities have declining contracts. We have one, it's not overly popular here, but it's what we call our 0% contract. And what happens is, over time, when you put the money in, after 36 months, so over time, so between day 1 and 35 months, you get 70% of that back, okay? But after 36 months, it goes all the way down to 0. And you guys are probably like, oh my gosh, why would we do that? That doesn't sound like a good idea. Well, the reason why you would possibly do that is because the entrance fee amount that you put in varied greatly between the 90% and the 0. So some people may decide that they don't want to give that much money to Acacia Creek, so the 0 makes more sense to them because they can invest the rest and they can secure their future and secure their retirement, but not have to put as much of an investment in. Or maybe there is a desire to have that money secured and be more of a legacy, so the 90% makes more. So you're more willing to give a little bit more of an entrance fee in order to have that 90% come back to you. So those are things to consider. I do want to tell you guys a little bit about the tax deductions. So in the fee-for-service contract or the rental contract, which we do have a couple apartments that are available for the rental contract, there are very specific tax benefits to actually doing the entrance fee. And I know that's probably important because when you've got a lot of equity in your home, you're sitting here trying to figure out the tax equation for how that's going to go. We all know that the laws for the capital gains tax for a couple is $500,000 and for a single is $250,000. With the potential tax deductions that exist on top of that for an entrance fee are really beneficial. So I'm going to go through those. So you can, if you do an entrance fee, one of the first things that you can do is, mattering on the size of the entrance fee, it works out to be between $18,000 and $25,000 that you can potentially write off for that one-time entrance fee, okay? Then every year, you can write off a certain amount of money for the monthly fees, and that ranges about $400,000, not $400,000, sorry guys, $4,000. Sorry to get you excited there. And so that is something that you can do every year. And then if you have additional medical expenses based on your amount of your income and your medical expenses, you can write off an additional amount. So that's an equation that you would have to do. It says that your medical expenses have to be about 7% of your income in order for you to have that deduction. So these are things that you can talk to your accountant about, or as you're running your numbers, these are things to take into consideration. And they're only offered to you as it relates to the entrance fee contract. One of the other things that I think is really great also to mention is, so, we were talking about those scenarios on how we're going to manage our money. One of the things is the entrance fee actually can be a little bit of a tax shelter, because let's say you take the money from your house and you invest it all. And then when you go to take that money out, you of course have to pay taxes on it. But if you took the money from the home and actually put it into the entrance fee, when that money comes back to you, it's not taxable, like it would be if you took it out of your investments. So it has a little bit of a tax shelter advantage as well. That was a lot of financial detail. Did I lose everybody? Any questions about, did everybody get, there's a test later. We can talk about this over and over and over again as you guys are learning different things. So I think I've talked a little bit about these. So one of the things I also just wanted to mention is, as we're looking at our home and we're looking at, I'm assuming you guys are probably on these pendulums of like trying to decide, okay, should I stay at home? How's this gonna go? What are the benefits of staying in my home? What are the benefits of other communities I may be looking at? And then what are the other benefits of Patient Creek? And so one of the things that you should always take into account is kind of unforeseen medical expenses. One of the things that I think is really challenging right now is none of us have a crystal ball. We don't know how it's going to go. So as a daughter, and also who was a caregiver for my dad who had dementia for over 10 years, I will tell you that I never thought that we were going to be dealing with the medical and health ramifications of dealing with my dad having dementia. And so none of us necessarily know how all of that's going to go. And so how do we figure out, or how do we create an equation for something that we have no idea whether or not we're going to need that? And a lot of people don't end up necessarily needing skilled nursing, but we also have a lot of different medical things that may be a challenge that we need to consider. We may not all need 24-hour nursing care, and I would bet sitting in this room, there's a very, very small percentage of us that are probably going to need any of that assistance. But a lot of assisted living and memory care services are not covered by Medicare. How many of you thought that assisted living and memory care was covered by Medicare? Good. Nobody here. Great. I usually get some hand raises on that. You thought it was. You thought so? So there is a very small portion of senior care that is actually covered by Medicare, and it's about 30 days, and it's a part of Medicare Part B. So it's usually post a hospital stay, and it's about 30 days that you can get assisted living services covered. Also, if you have a long-term care insurance policy, that is something that you also can have consideration. But most long-term care insurance policies only cover when you need what's called ADL assistance. Does anybody know what ADL assistance means? Good job. All right, I wish I had like a candy to pass out. Assisted daily living. So the way I like to look at that is all that stuff you do before you go outside for the day to get yourself all ready, those are your activities of daily living. So it's brushing your teeth, it's eating your breakfast, it's putting your clothes on, it's taking your shower. All of that kind of stuff is called activities of daily living. So unless you need that type of supportive care, your long-term care insurance policy isn't really going to kick in. So what that means is there's a potential of about, they're actually saying in home care, and actually there's a gentleman on our team, and one of them's back there, actually quoted me a double number when I shared this stat with him. Right now, they are saying that if you need supportive care in the home, it can cost you about $55,000 annually. And this is a nationwide cost. A cost that I was quoted here in the Bay Area, which almost made me faint, was between $80,000 and $100,000 a year. And that just makes my heart go a little palpitative. So just when you're thinking about that, so even if you just need that for 6 months or a year, that is a significant amount of money for that service. So that's something that you always want to take into account. Of course, none of us have that crystal ball that I talked about, so we don't necessarily know what the math is that we're going to need to do for that. Sure, of course. No, most of them don't come into account until you need ADL assistance. Yeah. So it's not going to come. Yeah. So it's not going to cover like independent living or any of that stuff. It's going to, for those very fundamental ADL assistance. Usually, actually, the insurance companies usually make that decision. Yeah, they usually require you to provide some documentation of the services that you are needing, and then they'll that whether or not they'll reimburse. Yes. Yeah, I think that's a really big challenge. We've been talking about actually doing an event about, kind of long-term care and what it actually means, because it is evolving. A lot of people have had policies for a very, very long time, and I know people who have had policies and, rates are doubling, and they've been putting into them for 20 plus years. And so, you're trying to weigh that whole benefit of, am I actually going to ever need this? Am I going to actually ever use it versus paying this premium? So I can relate to that challenge. And so I'm going to switch gears to a little happier topic and talk a little bit more about the lifestyle. I'm going to save all my technical talk for our next discussion. But one of the things that I did want to bring up, and I mentioned it briefly, was about the successful aging. Here at Acacia Creek, we have a program that is to help people develop the ability for them to do what they want to do and kind of live the best that they can. And so we develop programming, and you actually meet with somebody from our team, and they have a conversation with you about how you can do the things that you like to do, how we can get you connected into the community. And I think that's one of the greatest benefits of putting aside all this financial mumbo jumbo. It's really about where can you feel the most empowered and have the most autonomy in your life, because you also don't want to live in a community environment where you feel like you're being restricted. And here at Acacia Creek, they actually have a saying about that this is where we like to party here. And if you ever have the opportunity to come back and enjoy some of the parties, we are actually doing an event on March 15th with the Bay Philharmonic. We're going to do a little preview event of their Celtic celebration, and we're going to be doing a fun event here, and then we're going to be taking you guys up to the hill for this beautiful concert under the stars, under a tent actually, that will be available to you. So always mark your calendars for that, because you'll want to come back in and see that. So that is a big part of what is that we are trying to do here at Acacia Creek, making sure to allow you to be able to be financially stable, but then also be able to have the autonomy to live the life that you want here. And then the other thing is, and I know everybody we just had this great storm, and how many of you guys have a little bit of cleanup to do post this storm? Did anybody have any trees go down, or hopefully nobody have any roof problems or any of that? But one thing that also is to consider is that stuff is also an unforeseen cost, as the wonderful of home ownership. But all of that is not a concern for you here. And so if you're in an environment where, there's a lot of hills in this area, so I can't imagine, some of the damage that was probably to streets and homes during this big storm that we just had. But you have a low maintenance lifestyle here. So this is actually the view of one of our corner apartments that we have. And so you have the ability to enjoy the beauty of the Bay Area without some of the trouble. Is there any questions about the CCRC or any of the finances? How many are joining us for the next session to go through the contracts? All right, okay. All right, get your pencils ready. Is this helpful? Yes. Okay. Well, I started late, but we're still right on time, so that's good. Well, if there's no other questions, we do have some snacks in between our next one, and you guys can get settled, maybe go to the restroom. If you think of a question when we're in the next session, feel free, we'll talk about it. Just to manage expectations, we're actually going to be walking you guys through an actual contract, our 90% refundable contract. We're going to walk through it. We're going to talk about key elements. Also going to share a little bit about the next steps from a paperwork perspective. So we're going to get a little bit technical, a little bit detailed around all of this, but hopefully it'll be beneficial so that you guys have the information to be able to share with your families, financial planners, anybody that is helping you in this conversation, spouses. So that's the goal of that. So you guys can walk away really empowered with the information around what that contract involves. All right, well, thank you. We'll see you in a minute.